My cousin Derek was practically glowing with satisfaction as he watched me unwrap that box of chocolates, his arms crossed and that familiar smirk plastered across his face. He was absolutely convinced that giving me expired candy in front of the entire family would be the perfect humiliation, the final proof that I was still the family failure who didn't deserve respect. But when I calmly walked over to my jacket, pulled out an envelope, and announced that I had something for everyone to see, his confident expression started to crack. And when I opened that envelope to reveal copies of bank statements showing my 7-figure net worth, along with a letter from the charity I just established in our late grandfather's name, Derek's face went from smug superiority to complete panic, and he actually started hyperventilating so badly that Aunt Martha had to get him a paper bag. That was 6 months ago, and I'm sharing this story with you now because Derek called me last week. Not to apologize. Derek has never apologized for anything in his life, but to ask if I could give him a job at my company. Let me take you back to the beginning, because to understand why that moment was so perfectly satisfying, you need to know the whole ugly history of how my family treated the black sheep who dared to dream differently. I grew up in a family where success was measured by very specific standards: college degree, corporate job, suburban house, and the right kind of wife. My parents, my aunts and uncles, my cousins, they all followed this blueprint religiously. Everyone except me. From the time I was young, I was different. While my cousins were playing video games, I was taking apart radios to see how they worked. While they were studying business and accounting in college, I dropped out after 2 years to start my own electronics repair shop. My family was horrified. "You're throwing your life away," my father told me. "You'll never amount to anything without a degree." But the person who made this clear most often was Derek. Derek, who was 2 years younger than me, but acted like he was my superior in every way. Derek graduated summa cum laude with a business degree, got a job at a prestigious consulting firm, married his college girlfriend in an expensive wedding, and bought a house in the best neighborhood in town. Derek was everything the family wanted their children to be, and Derek never let me forget it. At every family gathering, Derek would find ways to remind everyone of the difference between us. When people asked about my business, Derek would jump in with comments like, "Well, it's not exactly a career, is it? More like a hobby that pays the bills." When I'd mention a project I was working on, Derek would say things like, "That's nice, but when are you going to get serious about your future?" The rest of the family enabled this behavior because Derek represented their values. He was proof that their way of thinking was right, and I was proof of what happened when you strayed from the path. At family dinners, Derek would talk about his latest promotion, his investment portfolio, his vacation plans, while I sat quietly eating my food and trying to change the subject. My parents loved Derek like a second son. "Why can't you be more like your cousin?" my mother would ask me privately. "Derek has his life together." What they didn't know, what none of them knew, was that my little electronics repair shop was growing. What started as fixing broken TVs and computers in my garage had evolved into something much bigger. I'd begun developing custom solutions for small businesses, then medium-sized companies, then major corporations. I wasn't just fixing things anymore. I was innovating, creating, building something from nothing. But I never talked about it at family gatherings, partly because they wouldn't have understood, and partly because I'd learned early on that sharing my successes only gave Derek more ammunition to tear me down in subtler ways. The breaking point came last Christmas at our annual family gift exchange. Every year, all the aunts, uncles, and cousins would gather at my grandmother's house for dinner and gifts. We'd always done a Secret Santa-style exchange where everyone drew names and bought gifts for each other. That year, Derek had drawn my name. Throughout dinner, Derek was his usual charming self, regaling everyone with stories about his latest business trip to New York, his plans to buy a vacation home, his wife's promotion at her marketing firm. I sat there quietly, as always, listening to the family praise Derek's achievements and asking me the same polite questions they always asked. "How's the shop doing?" with that tone that suggested they didn't really want to know. Then came gift time. The gifts were exchanged in no particular order, and everyone made a big show of opening them and thanking the giver. My Aunt Sarah got a beautiful scarf from my cousin Michelle. My Uncle Tom received a nice bottle of wine from my father. Derek's wife, Jennifer, got an expensive candle set for my mother. Then Derek stood up with theatrical flair. "I have something special for my cousin," he announced, grinning at me. "I put a lot of thought into this gift." He handed me a beautifully wrapped box. The wrapping was elegant, expensive looking, the same quality wrapping paper Derek used for all his gifts. I opened it carefully, hoping that maybe, finally, Derek had decided to treat me with some basic respect. Inside was a box of chocolate. Not just any chocolate. It was a fancy brand, the kind you'd buy at an upscale department store. For a moment, I felt touched. Maybe Derek was finally making an effort. Then I looked closer at the box. The expiration date was clearly visible. The chocolates had expired 8 months ago. The room fell silent. Everyone was looking at the box in my hands, and slowly they began to notice what I had noticed. My grandmother, who was sitting next to me, actually leaned over to look at the date. Derek was watching me with barely contained glee. He'd planned this moment perfectly. In front of the entire family, he'd given me garbage and wrapped it beautifully, knowing that everyone would see exactly what he thought of me. "Oh my grandmother whispered. Derek shrugged with fake innocence. "I'm sorry, I must have grabbed the wrong box from my pantry. You know how it is. Sometimes you clean out the old stuff and accidentally mix it up with the good stuff." The family was looking back and forth between Derek and me, waiting to see how I'd react. Some looked embarrassed. Others looked like they thought it might be a genuine mistake, though Derek's barely suppressed smirk made it clear this was no accident. I could feel their eyes on me, waiting for me to get angry or embarrassed or to just quietly accept this humiliation like I'd accepted all the others over the years. Instead, I stood up calmly, walked over to where I'd hung my jacket, and pulled out an envelope I'd been carrying. "You know what, Derek?" I said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Since we're sharing gifts, I have something I'd like to share with everyone too." Derek's smirk started to fade. "What do you mean?" I opened the envelope and pulled out several pieces of paper. "These are copies of my business financial statements from this past year. And this," I held up a separate document, "is a letter from the Patterson Foundation acknowledging my donation to establish the Harold Peterson Memorial Scholarship for underprivileged students interested in technical careers." The room went completely silent. I looked around at my family, these people who had spent years treating me like a failure while they celebrated Derek's corporate success. I wanted everyone to know that my little electronics hobby has generated just over $2.8 million in revenue this year. My personal net worth is currently $1.4 million, and I've just donated $100,000 in Grandpa Harold's name to help kids like me who want to work with their hands instead of pushing papers. My grandmother gasped. My mother's mouth fell open. Derek's face went from smug to confused to absolutely terrified in the span of about 10 seconds. "The scholarship," I continued, "will be awarded annually to students who show promise in technical fields but come from families who don't understand or support their dreams." I thought Grandpa would have liked that, since he always told me to follow my passion, even when everyone else said I was making a mistake. I walked back over to Derek, who was now pale and breathing rapidly. "Thank you for the expired chocolate, Derek. It's actually perfect. It reminds me of something that looks good on the outside but is worthless when you examine it closely." Derek started hyperventilating. Literally hyperventilating. His wife jumped up to help him, and my Aunt Martha ran to get him a paper bag to breathe into. The rest of the family just sat there in stunned silence, staring at the financial statements I'd passed around the room. The numbers didn't lie. The quiet family failure, the college dropout, the guy with the hobby business, was worth more than all of them combined. My father was the first to speak. "Son, I had no idea your business was doing so well." "That's because you never asked," I said quietly. "For 10 years, every family gathering has been about celebrating Derek's achievements while treating me like an embarrassment. None of you ever wanted to know how I was really doing." My mother was crying now. "We're so proud of you," she whispered. "Are you?" I asked. "Or are you just proud of the money? Because 6 months ago, when you thought I was barely scraping by, You treated me like a disappointment." Derek finally caught his breath enough to speak. "I didn't know," he gasped. You never said." "I never said because every time I tried to share anything positive, you found a way to diminish it. Every success I mentioned, you turned into evidence of how much more successful you were. So I stopped sharing. I looked around the room at my family, really looked at them, and for the first time in years, I saw them clearly. They weren't bad people, but they were small people. People who measured worth by conventional standards and couldn't see value in anything that didn't fit their narrow definition of success. "I'm going to go now," I said, gathering up my financial statements. "Thank you for dinner, Grandma. The food was delicious as always." I walked toward the door, and my father called after me. "Where are you going?" I turned back to face them all. My parents, my aunts and uncles, my cousins, and Derek, who was still sitting there looking like his world had just collapsed. "I'm going home to my life," I said. "The life I built while you were all convinced I was failing." As I walked out, I could hear the chaos erupting behind me. People were talking over each other, asking questions, and someone was crying. Derek was trying to explain himself, stammering apologies that sounded hollow and desperate. I drove home to my house, not a mansion, but a comfortable place that I owned outright, and sat in my living room thinking about everything that had just happened. For the first time in my adult life, I felt free. Free from their judgment, their expectations, their need to make me feel small so they could feel big. The call started the next day. First my mother, then my father, then various aunts and uncles. Everyone wanted to talk, to understand, to rebuild our relationship. They were all suddenly very interested in my business, my success, my future plans. Derek didn't call. For 6 months, I maintained polite but distant relationships with most of my family. I attended my grandmother's birthday party, where everyone was suddenly very respectful and interested in my opinions. I went to my cousin Michelle's graduation, where people actually listened when I talked instead of waiting for Derek to interrupt with something more important. Derek avoided me completely during this time. At family gatherings, he'd find excuses to be in different rooms, or he'd leave early. The golden boy had been dethroned, and he couldn't handle being in the same space as the cousin he'd spent years belittling. Then last week, my phone rang. "Hi, this is Derek." I almost hung up, but curiosity got the better of me. "Hello, Derek. I was wondering if we could maybe meet for coffee or something. I wanted to talk to you about something." "What kind of something?" There was a long pause. "Well, the thing is, my situation has changed recently, and I was hoping maybe you could help me out." "What do you mean your situation has changed?" Another pause. "I lost my job 3 weeks ago. The whole department got eliminated in a restructuring. And with the economy the way it is, finding something comparable has been challenging." I waited for him to continue. "I've been looking at other options, and I know you've built something really impressive with your business. I was wondering if there might be an opportunity for someone with my background to work with you." I had to bite my tongue to keep from laughing. Derek, the Derek who had spent years telling me I needed to get serious about my future, was asking me for a job. "You want to work for me?" I asked. "Well, I was thinking more like a partnership or consulting arrangement. I have a lot of business experience that could help you expand, maybe take things to the next level." "Derek," I interrupted, "do you remember what you gave me for Christmas?" Silence. "Do you remember sitting there watching me open expired chocolate that you'd deliberately given me to humiliate me in front of our entire family?" "Look, I know that was—" I wasn't thinking clearly that night. I was going through some stress at work, and I took it out on you unfairly. You were stressed at work, so you decided to publicly humiliate your cousin with garbage disguised as a gift. I know how it looks, but— Derek, let me ask you something. In all the years you spent telling me I needed to get serious about my life, did you ever once ask me what I was actually doing? Did you ever show any genuine interest in my business or my goals?" Well, you were always so quiet about it." "I was quiet about it because every time I tried to share anything, you made it clear that what I was doing didn't matter. You made it clear that unless I was following your path, I was wasting my time. I know I made mistakes. Derek, you didn't make mistakes. You made choices. You chose to treat me like I was beneath you. You chose to use family gatherings as opportunities to show everyone how much more successful you were than me. You chose to give me expired food as a Christmas gift because you thought it was funny to remind everyone that I was the family disappointment. The silence stretched on for nearly a minute. So what are you saying? Derek finally asked. That you won't even consider helping family? I'm saying that you're not asking for help, Derek. You're asking for an opportunity that you don't deserve from someone you spent years treating like dirt. And you're framing it as if you'd be doing me a favor by bringing your business expertise to my little electronics hobby. That's not what I meant. That's exactly what you meant. Even now, when you're unemployed and asking me for help, you can't bring yourself to acknowledge that maybe, just maybe, the cousin you looked down on actually knew what he was doing. Fine, Derek said, and I could hear the anger creeping into his voice. I get it. You want me to grovel. You want me to admit that you were right and I was wrong. No, Derek, I don't want you to grovel. I want you to understand something that you've never understood. Respect isn't something you give people based on how much money they make or what kind of job they have. Respect is something you give people because they're human beings who deserve basic dignity. So you're saying no. I'm saying that the person who gave his cousin expired chocolate for Christmas and laughed about it doesn't get to ask that same cousin for a job 6 months later. But what about family? Don't family members support each other? Derek, you spent 10 years making it clear that I wasn't really family. I was just the embarrassment you had to tolerate at gatherings. Now that you need something from me, suddenly family matters. I could hear him breathing heavily on the other end of the line. You know what the really sad part is? I continued. If you had ever, even once, treated me with basic respect, I would have helped you in a heartbeat. If you had ever asked me about my business out of genuine interest instead of condescension, I would have been happy to share my success with you. But you couldn't do that because you needed me to be the failure to make yourself feel successful. So that's it? You're just going to hold a grudge forever. I'm not holding a grudge, Derek. I'm just not pretending that our relationship is something it never was. You want to know the difference between us? When I was struggling to build my business, I never once asked you for help, even though you were doing well. You know why? Because I had too much pride to ask for help from someone who thought I was pathetic. But now that you're struggling, you don't have any problem asking for help from the person you thought was pathetic. I never thought you were pathetic. Derek, you gave me expired food for Christmas. In front of our entire family. What do you call that? Another long silence. I'm sorry, he said finally. I'm really sorry about the chocolate thing. It was cruel and stupid and I regret it. I believe you regret it, I said. But I think you regret it because it backfired on you. Not because you understand why it was wrong. That's not fair. Derek, let me ask you one more question. If I had never revealed my financial situation that night, if everyone still thought I was the family failure, would you be calling me right now asking for a job? The silence told me everything I needed to know. I didn't think so, I said. Good luck with your job search, Derek. I'm sure someone with your impressive credentials won't have any trouble finding something suitable. I hung up the phone and sat there thinking about how different this conversation might have been if Derek had spent the last 10 years treating me like family instead of like a cautionary tale. That evening, my phone rang again. This time it was my mother. I heard Derek called you, she said. Word travels fast. He's really struggling, honey. Jennifer is pregnant with her second child, and they have that big mortgage. Mom, are you seriously calling to ask me to give Derek a job after what he did to me? I'm just saying that families should help each other. Where was that philosophy for the 10 years Derek was treating me like garbage? Where was this concern for family when he was humiliating me at every gathering? That's different. No, it's not different. Derek is facing consequences for his choices, just like I face consequences for mine. The difference is, I dealt with my consequences alone because everyone was too busy celebrating Derek to notice I was struggling. You could have asked for help. From who? From the family that was convinced I was throwing my life away. From Derek, who took every opportunity to remind me how much more successful he was. My mother sighed. I know we didn't handle things well with you. We didn't understand what you were trying to accomplish. You didn't try to understand. There's a difference. So you won't help him? Mom, if Derek wants help, he can find it the same way I did, by working for it. I'm not going to hand him a solution to his problems just because we share DNA. What if it was you? What if you needed help? It was me, Mom. For years it was me. And I learned to help myself because asking for help from people who didn't respect me was worse than struggling alone. After I hung up, I realized something important. I wasn't angry anymore. For years, I'd carried around the hurt and frustration of being the family disappointment. But sitting there in my comfortable home, thinking about my successful business and the scholarship I'd created in my grandfather's memory, I felt something I hadn't expected: pity. I pitied Derek, not because he'd lost his job, but because he'd spent so many years measuring his worth by comparing himself to others. I pitied my family, not because they'd been wrong about me, but because they'd missed out on knowing who I really was because they were so invested in who they thought I should be. The next day, I did something that surprised even me. I called Derek back. Derek, it's me. Oh, hi. I've been thinking about our conversation yesterday, and I want to clarify something. Okay, I'm not going to give you a job, but I am going to give you some advice if you want it. I'm listening. Stop looking for someone to save you and start building something yourself. You have a business degree and 10 years of consulting experience. Use that knowledge to create your own opportunities instead of asking other people to create them for you. That's easy for you to say. No, Derek, it's not easy for me to say. It's the hardest thing I could possibly say to someone who spent years making me feel small. Every instinct I have is telling me to hang up this phone and let you figure it out on your own, the way I had to. Then why are you saying it? Because I'm not you. I don't get satisfaction from watching people struggle, even people who deserve it. There was a long pause. I don't deserve your help, Derek said quietly. No, you don't. But here's the thing about respect, Derek. It's not something you earn once and keep forever. It's something you have to demonstrate every day through your actions. You lost my respect a long time ago, but that doesn't mean you can't earn it back. How? By becoming the kind of person who deserves it. By treating people with dignity, regardless of their circumstances. By building something meaningful instead of just climbing someone else's ladder. And if I do that, then maybe someday we can have a relationship based on mutual respect instead of family obligation. I hung up the phone and smiled, thinking about my grandfather Harold, the man whose name was on the scholarship I'd established. Grandpa Harold had worked with his hands his entire life. He was a carpenter who built beautiful things that lasted for generations. The family had always been a little embarrassed by his blue-collar job, but he was the only one who ever encouraged me to follow my passion. The world needs people who can fix things, he used to tell me. Don't let anybody tell you that working with your hands is less important than working with your head. 6 months ago, when Derek gave me that expired chocolate, I was angry and hurt and ready to cut ties with my family forever. But now, sitting in my workshop surrounded by the tools and projects that had built my fortune, I realized that Derek had actually given me something valuable that night, the motivation to finally show them who I really was. Sometimes the worst gifts lead to the best outcomes. Sometimes being underestimated is the greatest advantage you can have. And sometimes the people who try to make you feel small end up making you stronger than they ever imagined possible. Derek taught me that lesson without meaning to, wrapped up in a box of expired chocolate and delivered with a smirk that will probably haunt him for the rest of his life. If this story of unexpected vindication resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more tales of the underdog coming out on top. Have you ever been underestimated by someone who later regretted it? Share your story in the comments below. I love hearing about moments when quiet persistence pays off in the most satisfying ways possible.